was Steve Jobs really?
Do you think you know who I was? A genius, a tyrant, a visionary who changed the world, or just a lucky rebellious kid? I was born on February 24th, 1955, but my story began even before I opened my eyes. My biological parents were two young college students who, pressured by circumstances, decided to give me up for adoption. I was welcomed by Paul and Clara Jobs, a mechanic and an accountant, who promised something simple. They would give me love and the best education they could afford. From an early age, I wasn't the kind of child who was easy to handle, to curious, to questioning. At school, I would take apart and reassemble anything that fell into my hands. I didn't accept ready-made answers. One day, I saw my father building a fence in the backyard, and he told me, "If you're going to do something, do it right, even if no one will see it." That lesson stayed with me forever. But not everything was stable. I felt different. Maybe it was because I knew I was adopted, or maybe because inside me there was already a restlessness that couldn't fit into the small world around me. In my teenage years, I began to take an interest in electronics, and without knowing it, that would put me on the path to a meeting that would change not only my life, but the history of technology forever.
The meeting that changed everything.
Have you ever stopped to think how a single meeting can change the course of your whole life? I was 21 when I met Steve Wozniak, but the truth is we had met for the first time a few years earlier, introduced by a mutual friend. Was a genius with the electronics, shy but with an almost magical ability to bring circuits to life. I, on the other hand, had a knack for seeing the potential in ideas and turning them into something the world would want. At the time, I was studying at Reed College, but I dropped out after 6 months. It wasn't that I didn't like learning, I just hated following a set curriculum. I started attending only the classes I was interested in, such as calligraphy, without knowing that one day it would influence the aesthetics of all the computers I would create. Meanwhile, Wozniak was building a computer just for fun. When I saw what he had, I thought, "We can sell this." I convinced was to start a business together. The year was 1976, and we decided to begin in my parents' garage with no money but with an idea. We called our company Apple Computer. We sold my Volkswagen van and was his HP calculator to raise the initial capital. Our first product was the Apple I, sold as an assembled motherboard without a case or keyboard. It didn't look much like today's computers, but for that time, it was a silent revolution. What I didn't know was that this garage would become the birthplace of one of the most influential companies on the planet. But the road ahead would be anything but smooth.
From a dream to a revolution.
Have you ever felt that something that started small was about to explode and change everything? That's exactly how I lived the first years of Apple. The Apple I brought us some money, but it was the Apple II, launched in 1977, that truly put us on the map. It had color on the screen and was easy to use, something unheard of at the time. We weren't just selling computers, we were offering people a new way to work, learn, and create. With success, Apple grew fast. The company went public in 1980, and suddenly, the restless kid from the garage, was a multimillionaire, but money was never my goal. I wanted to create products that combined technology and art, that were almost functional poetry. Then came the Macintosh. In 1984, we went on stage with that iconic commercial inspired by George Orwell's 1984. I believed the Mac would be the machine that would free people from the dull grayness of corporate computers. And in a way, I was right. It had a friendly graphical interface, windows, icons, and even beautiful fonts, the result of the calligraphy classes I took at Reed. But not everyone at Apple shared my vision or my intense leadership style. My passion was often mistaken for stubbornness. What I didn't know was that, behind the boardroom doors, something was already being planned that would brutally change my life.
Being fired from my own company.
Can you imagine being kicked out of the company you yourself created? I lived it. In 1985, tensions within Apple reached their peak. I had brought in John Scully, former CEO of Pepsi, to lead the company. I thought he could help us grow, but our visions were far too different. I wanted innovation at any cost, he wanted safety and stability. The board of directors took his side, and suddenly I found myself without power, without a voice, and soon after without a position. At 30 years old, I was officially out of Apple. It was humiliating. I felt as if I had lost a part of myself. But over time, I realized that this defeat was actually an opportunity. I was free to create again without constraints. I founded Next, a computer company aimed at the education and research market. Our products were expensive but advanced, so advanced that years later they would be essential to Apple's rebirth. During this same period, I invested in a small animation company called Pixar. Little did I know it would create Toy Story and redefine the film industry. The funny thing is that, while the world saw a failure who had been thrown out of his own company, I was planting the seeds of two empires. Life sometimes knocks you down so you can build something even greater.
The return of the prodigal son.
Have you ever returned to a place you were expelled from, and on top of that, to save it? In 1996, Apple was on the brink of collapse. Our products were confusing, sales were plummeting, and the company I had founded seemed to have lost its soul. That's when Apple bought NEXT and, along with it, brought me back. I didn't return as a hero. Many people still saw me as arrogant and difficult. But I knew that to save Apple, we needed to make a radical cleanup. I cut product lines, simplified everything, and focused on design and functionality. I believed every detail mattered, from the chip to the box the computer came in. In 1998, we launched the iMac. Colorful, futuristic in design, and ready for the internet, it looked like nothing else on the market. It was an instant success and, more importantly, restored Apple's identity. That was just the beginning. My vision was to transform Apple from a computer manufacturer into a technology company for people's everyday lives. I wanted to create an ecosystem where hardware, software, and services worked together seamlessly. The world didn't know it yet, but we were about to start a sequence of creations that would forever change the way we live, work, and communicate.
Putting the world in your pocket.
Do you remember when music was on CD-discs, phones were only for calling, and the internet was a luxury? I wanted to change that. In 2001, we launched the iPod. 1,000 songs in your pocket, just like that. It wasn't just an MP3 player, it was an object of desire. With it and the iTunes Store, we reinvented the way people bought and listened to music. But I wasn't satisfied. I looked at the phone in my pocket and thought, this can be much more. After years of secret development, in 2007 we went on stage and introduced the iPhone. A phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator. All in one device. The world would never be the same. And it didn't stop there. In 2010, we launched the iPad, which many called a giant iPhone, but to me, it was a chance to redefine the way people interacted with content, from reading to gaming to working. These products weren't just technology, they were extensions of people. And each one was born from an obsession to unite functionality and beauty in a way that made sense in real life. Apple had become the company I had always dreamed of. But behind all this success, there was a much harder battle going on, and it wasn't in business.
The time I had left.
Have you ever wondered what you would do if you found out your time was running out? In 2003, I got the news that changed everything, a rare form of pancreatic cancer. It was operable, but stubbornly, I first sought alternative treatments, I lost time, and with time, I lost health. Eventually, I underwent surgery, but the disease returned years later. I kept working as much as I could. Every new product, every presentation on stage was a way to forget that my body was weakening. I didn't want to be remembered as a sick man. I wanted to be remembered as someone who tried to change the world. In August 2011, I realized I could no longer lead as before. I resigned as Apple's CEO but remained as chairman of the board. On October 5th of that year, at 56 years old, my journey ended. If there's one thing I learned, it's that time is the most valuable resource we have. Money, success, fame, all that can be rebuilt. But time never comes back. That's why my advice is simple. Follow what you love, be curious, take risks, and never settle for living someone else's life. Because, in the end, what really matters is leaving something that makes the world a little better than when you arrived.
And if this story moved you, just imagine how many more we're going to uncover here. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss a single journey told by the very ones who lived it from beginning to end.